What if the reason you're constantly tired isn't simply age? What if there's something happening inside your digestive system right now, something most doctors don't think to check first, something that could explain the fatigue, the brain fog, the weakness in your legs, and even that restless sleep you've been having for months, maybe even years? Stick with me for the next 25 minutes, because by the end of this video, you might finally understand what your body has been trying to tell you all along. Every single day, all across America, millions of people over 60 wake up tired. Not just didn't sleep great, tired. I mean bone deep, dragging yourself out of bed. Where did my energy go kind of tired. And almost all of them are told the same thing. Well, you're not getting any younger. And look, there's truth to that. Our bodies do change as we age. That's just reality. But here's what almost nobody talks about. Sometimes, the fatigue, the weakness, the brain fog, the digestive discomfort, the poor sleep, all of these things that get blamed on just getting older, they're actually connected to something happening in your gut. Not always, not for everyone, but for a surprising number of people, the answer isn't in their age, it's in their digestive system. And today, we're going to dig into one specific area that doctors sometimes consider when investigating unexplained fatigue in older adults, something involving the gut, and something that's often overlooked simply because the symptoms look so much like normal aging that nobody thinks to look any further. To really understand this, let me tell you about someone who went through this exact experience. I'll call him Robert. He's a 68-year-old retired school teacher from Ohio, and his story might sound familiar to a lot of you watching right now. Robert spent 35 years teaching high school history. He loved his job. He loved his students, and when he finally retired at 65, he had big plans. He wanted to travel with his wife, work on the garden he'd been neglecting for years, maybe finally write that book he'd always talked about. But about a year into retirement, Robert started noticing something strange. He was more tired than he'd ever been, even though he was finally getting more sleep and doing less physically demanding work than he had his entire career. At first, he chalked it up to the adjustment of retirement. Maybe my body just needs time to settle into this slower pace, he thought. But months went by, and instead of getting better, it got worse. He started needing naps in the afternoon, something he'd never done in his life. His wife noticed he seemed foggy sometimes, forgetting little things, losing his train of thought mid-sentence. And then there was his stomach, bloating after meals that didn't used to bother him. Some days he had almost no appetite at all. Other days he felt hungry but full after just a few bites. Robert mentioned it to his doctor at his next checkup, almost as an afterthought. I've just been feeling really run down lately. And his doctor did what most doctors do, started looking at the most common possibilities first. Doctors often look at several possible causes before finding the answer, and that's actually a good thing. It means they're being thorough. For Robert, his doctor started with the basics. Blood work to check his thyroid, since thyroid issues become more common with age and can absolutely cause fatigue, brain fog, and weight changes. They checked his blood sugar, since unmanaged blood sugar issues can cause exhaustion and that crash feeling. They looked at his heart function, since fatigue can sometimes be an early sign of cardiovascular issues. All of these are smart, important things to check, and for a lot of people, one of these tests does reveal the answer. But for Robert, everything came back essentially normal. His thyroid was fine. His blood sugar was fine. His heart looked healthy for his age. And so, Robert was told what so many people in his situation are told. Everything looks normal. This might just be part of getting older. Try to get more rest. And for a while, Robert accepted that. But deep down, something didn't feel right to him. He knew his own body. And this didn't feel like normal aging. It felt like something was actively wrong, something nobody had found yet. Over the next several months, Robert's symptoms didn't just continue, they became more specific, more noticeable. The fatigue was still there, but now he was also dealing with this persistent low-grade stomach discomfort, a feeling of bloating that seemed to come and go without any clear pattern. His appetite became unpredictable. Some days he barely wanted to eat. Other days he felt hungry shortly after a meal, which was strange because that had never happened to him before. His wife mentioned that he seemed paler than usual, and Robert himself noticed something he hadn't paid attention to before. His nails seemed more brittle, and he was bruising more easily. Little bumps that used to leave no mark were now leaving noticeable bruises. Most Americans over 60 never connect these symptoms together. Fatigue gets blamed on age. Bloating gets blamed on something I ate. Brittle nails get blamed on dry weather. Poor sleep gets blamed on stress or just, that's how sleep is now. Each symptom on its own seems minor, explainable, easy to dismiss. But what happens when all of these symptoms are actually pieces of the same puzzle, just nobody's put them together yet? Let's take a step back here, because to understand what might be going on with someone like Robert, it helps to understand something most people never really think about, just how connected your gut is to literally everything else in your body. Your digestive system isn't just responsible for digesting food in some isolated way, it's where your body absorbs almost all of the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals it needs to function, things like iron, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and so many others. If something in your gut is interfering with how well your body absorbs these nutrients, even if you're eating a perfectly healthy diet, your body might not actually be getting what it needs. And here's why that matters so much for fatigue specifically. Iron, for example, is essential for carrying oxygen through your blood to every cell in your body. If your body isn't absorbing enough iron, even if your diet looks fine on paper, you can develop a type of anemia, low red blood cell count, and one of the most common symptoms of anemia is, you guessed it, fatigue. Not just a little tired, but that deep, persistent exhaustion that doesn't go away with rest. Vitamin B12 plays a similarly massive role. It's involved in energy production, nerve function, and yes, even brain function, which is part of why B12 issues are sometimes linked to brain fog and difficulty concentrating. So when someone's gut isn't absorbing nutrients properly, the effects don't stay in the gut. They ripple outward into energy levels, into brain function, into nearly every system in the body. So what kinds of things can interfere with how well your gut absorbs nutrients? There are actually quite a few possibilities, and this is exactly why doctors often need to investigate carefully rather than jumping to conclusions. Some people have conditions affecting the stomach lining that reduce how well certain nutrients, like B12, get absorbed. Some people develop changes in their gut bacteria that affect digestion overall, and in some cases, doctors also consider the possibility of certain intestinal parasites, including some types of worm infections which, while less common in the United States than in some other parts of the world, can still occur, sometimes through contaminated food or water, and can sometimes go undiagnosed for a long time because the symptoms are so general, fatigue, digestive discomfort, appetite changes, that they get attributed to other causes first. I want to be really clear here. This isn't about causing alarm or suggesting that everyone watching this has a parasite. That would be irresponsible, and frankly, it's not true. But it is one of the possibilities that doctors sometimes consider when investigating unexplained fatigue combined with digestive symptoms and signs of nutrient deficiency, especially when more common causes have already been ruled out. And in Robert's case, this is actually where his story took an unexpected turn. After months of feeling dismissed, Robert decided to push for more answers. He went back to his doctor, but this time, he came prepared. He'd written down every symptom, the fatigue, the bloating, the appetite changes, the bruising, the brain fog, everything, even things that seemed unrelated. His doctor, to her credit, took this seriously. She ordered a more complete blood panel, this time specifically checking his iron levels, his B12 levels, and a few other markers that hadn't been part of the initial round of testing. A week later, the results came back and they showed something significant. Robert's iron levels were quite low enough to explain a lot of his fatigue. His B12 was also on the lower end of normal. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Robert, because low iron and low B12 don't just appear out of nowhere, especially in someone whose diet included plenty of iron-rich and B12-rich foods. So his doctor asked a question that, looking back, Robert wished someone had asked months earlier. Is something preventing your body from absorbing these nutrients in the first place? This is where Robert's doctor referred him to a gastroenterologist, a digestive health specialist, for further evaluation, and I want to pause here and say something important. This entire process, the blood work, the follow-up questions, the referral, this is exactly how it's supposed to work. This isn't a story about a doctor missing something obvious. It's a story about how complex the human body is, and how symptoms that seem unrelated, fatigue, bloating, low iron, brain fog, can sometimes take time and the right combination of tests to connect. The gastroenterologist ran additional tests, looking more closely at Robert's digestive system and what might be affecting nutrient absorption. And during this evaluation, they discovered something that had likely been present for quite some time. an intestinal infection that had been quietly affecting his digestive system, interfering with how well his body absorbed certain nutrients without causing the kind of dramatic, obvious symptoms most people associate with something being seriously wrong. Instead, it had been showing up exactly the way Robert experienced it, as fatigue, brain fog, digestive discomfort, and gradual changes that crept in slowly enough that they were easy to attribute to just getting older. However, the most important sign appears later, and here's what I mean by that. The initial symptoms, fatigue, mild bloating, occasional appetite changes, these are so common, so non-specific that on their own, they rarely raise red flags. It's often only when multiple symptoms accumulate over time, fatigue plus digestive issues plus changes in nutrient levels, plus things like brittle nails or easy bruising, that a clearer pattern starts to emerge, and by that point, months or even years may have passed. This is exactly why so many cases like Robert's go unnoticed for so long, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the human body is incredibly good at adapting and compensating, right up until it can't anymore. Robert later told his family that looking back, the signs had been there for at least 2 years. He just hadn't known what he was looking for, and honestly, neither had anyone around him. Once Robert's doctors identified what was going on, he was able to begin appropriate treatment under medical supervision. I want to be very careful here because this video isn't about promising that everyone's fatigue has this exact cause or that there's some simple fix that works for everyone. Every person's situation is different, and the right path forward always depends on a proper medical evaluation. What I can tell you is that for Robert, having an actual explanation after months of feeling dismissed, after months of wondering if this was just his new normal, was honestly emotional for him. He described it as finally feeling like his concerns had been validated, like there had been a real, identifiable reason behind what he'd been experiencing all along. Over the following months, working closely with his healthcare team, Robert gradually began to notice improvements: his energy levels, his digestion, his mental clarity. Again, I want to stress, this isn't a guarantee for everyone, and it took time. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but for Robert, finally understanding what was happening inside his body was the turning point that everything else followed from. So what's the takeaway here for you, watching this right now? It's not that everyone over 60 who's tired has the exact same thing going on that Robert did. It's something bigger than that. It's this: fatigue, weakness, brain fog, digestive changes, poor sleep. These symptoms deserve to be taken seriously, especially when they're new, persistent, or getting worse over time. They're not automatically just aging, and they're not something you simply have to accept and live with. If you've been feeling like something is off with your body, more tired than you should be, more foggy than usual, dealing with digestive changes that don't make sense, please don't dismiss that feeling. You know your own body better than anyone else does. And if your first conversation with a doctor doesn't lead anywhere, that doesn't mean there's nothing to find. Sometimes, like with Robert, it just means more questions need to be asked, and sometimes, more specific testing is needed to get the full picture. Now, regardless of what might be going on for any individual person, there are some general things that support digestive health and overall well-being as we age, things that are genuinely worth incorporating into daily life. Nutrition matters enormously. Eating a varied diet with plenty of whole foods gives your body the building blocks it needs, even if absorption issues need to be addressed separately by a doctor. Fiber is particularly important for digestive health. Foods like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes support healthy digestion and regularity, something that becomes more important as our digestive systems naturally slow down with age. Hydration plays a bigger role than most people realize. Proper hydration supports digestion, energy levels, and even cognitive function, and as we discussed in previous videos, our sense of thirst can become less reliable as we age, so it helps to drink water consistently throughout the day rather than waiting until you feel thirsty. Sleep quality matters too. Poor sleep and digestive issues often go hand in hand. Each one can make the other worse. So prioritizing a consistent sleep routine can have ripple effects throughout your whole body. Physical activity, even gentle activity like daily walking, supports digestion, energy levels, and overall circulation. You don't need intense exercise, just consistent movement. And finally, and this might be the most important one, regular medical checkups, including blood work that checks things like iron and vitamin levels, especially if you've been experiencing ongoing fatigue or digestive changes. These checkups are exactly how situations like Robert's eventually get identified. Here's what I really want you to take away from Robert's story. For nearly 2 years, Robert felt like something was wrong with his body. And for nearly 2 years, he was told it was probably just age. That gap between what someone feels in their own body and what gets identified by tests, that gap is real, and it can be incredibly frustrating and even isolating. If you've ever felt that way, like you know something isn't right but you can't quite get anyone to take it seriously, I want you to know you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Your fatigue is real. Your brain fog is real. Your digestive discomfort is real. And these things deserve real answers, even if it takes more than one conversation, more than one test to get there. Aging does bring changes, that's simply true. But not every change has to be accepted without question, and not every symptom has to be your new normal forever. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for your health is simply refuse to stop asking questions until you get an answer that actually makes sense. If Robert's story resonated with you, even a little, if you've been feeling unusually tired, foggy, or dealing with digestive changes that don't quite make sense, please don't just brush it off. Talk to your doctor, be specific about your symptoms, and if something doesn't feel resolved, don't be afraid to ask for further testing or a second opinion. You know your body, and your concerns matter. If this video helped you understand something new today, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this information reach more people who might need to hear it. And if you've experienced something similar, fatigue that didn't make sense, symptoms that took time to get answers for, I'd love for you to share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Don't forget to subscribe because we'll continue exploring topics just like this, real, honest, and focused on helping you feel your best as you age. Take care of yourself, listen to your body, and I'll see you in the next one.